So this is the second of my presentations on my view of things. Again, just so that those who know me know where I'm coming from. This one's on faith and religion. A good way of describing where I'm at now in my middle age is to take you through how I got here. So I'm going to do that on a 2x2 matrix that will just show you where I was at each stage of my life. I'll start at the age of 4. As the only thing I can remember before the age of 4 was watching the moon landing with my mum and dad. I'll start at 4. Age ranges and positions are approximate in general anyway. So what we've got at the top of this graph is 100% religious adherence. Being a Catholic, that would have meant going to Mass, benediction, evening prayers, confession, Holy Communion, reading the catechisms, etc., etc. At the bottom of the graph, we've got no religious adherence. In other words, total non-observance and indifference to religious practices and doctrine. To the right-hand side, we've got total belief in God. If you're over here, you're certain that God exists. And on the left-hand side, you're certain that there is no God. Anything between the far left and the far right of the graph, you're agnostic to some degree. The further to the right of the centre line you are, the more you believe that the balance of probability is that there is a God, and the further to the left, the more you think that the balance of probability is that there is no God. So, we've got religious at the top, irreligious at the bottom, belief in a God to the right, belief that there's no God to the left. And here's where it leaves those quadrants. So moving on. So, age 4 to 9, I went to church, the priest came around to visit, everyone treated me well, and I was told that there was a God. Christmas was also tied up with this, and I like Christmas, so yeah, why wouldn't I believe in God? I didn't read the Bible at this stage, but from what I heard in church, you'd only get punished if you were a bad person. Also, my parents treated the Old Testament and much of the New Testament as purely allegorical, with the exception of the Gospels. Punishment in hell came up a few times, but only in the same context of telling you that if you went outside in the night, the bogeyman would get you, or if you were bad, then Father Christmas would leave you coal rather than presents. Of course, I could also believe in Father Christmas at this stage, as there was evidence for him in the form of presents. Oh, also, always Father Christmas to us, not Santa Claus, and I was quite happy with our Father Christmas being dressed in green rather than being marketed in red. Okay. 10 to 16. I was at Jesuit boarding school during this time, so observance of religion increased. Went to Mass a few times a week, benediction once a week, studied religious doctrine up to O levels, etc., etc. The Jesuits were quite clever in their reasoning as well, and even back then, many were positing just an absence of God rather than less rational eternal punishment of hell. There was a nice sense of belonging. Religion was part of the culture. Note also, science was well taught at school, and my parents encouraged me to be free thinking, and they liked science. I had many happy trips with my father to look at archaeology and natural history in museums, and science was plugging in quite a lot of the explanation for things with evidence. God wasn't that evident, and so I was at least questioning the reality of God at this stage. Okay, age 17 to 19. My A-level studies included biology and geology. I further developed my interest in natural history. There was no problem combining this with a belief in God. My reasoning was that yes, God could have set off the Big Bang and intended abaryogenesis, and given natural selection a bit of a nudge in the right direction with the odd massive meteorite or supervolcano. But there was no need for man to be created directly by God. And by the way, evolution has taken many turns because of luck rather than pure natural selection. If you want to believe in God, put God where the things of pure chance, I guess those would be acts of God, have happened, like meteorites, volcanoes, planetary collisions, etc., rather than trying to fill gaps with God. Anyway, religion was becoming more about moral guidance from the good bits from the Bible rather than any belief in Scripture. So, a bit less religious at this age. Moving on then. 20 to 35. I was taking my degree in geology, and I met many people of other belief systems. I'd go to mass sometimes, especially with my parents, but I could reason that all the monotheistic religions were just worshipping the same God in different ways. Having said that, Western Catholicism seemed to be more evolved than most, and seemed to be a force for good, so I was quite happy with it. Note that where the teachings of the Catholic Church just didn't make sense, they were left to the conscience of the individual in my society. So prohibition of contraception, for example, could be rationalised away such that it did not have to be observed. Worth noting that as both my parents were in education, education was held in highest regard. Remember my mother buying me A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, and Life, an unauthorised biography by Richard Forte of the Natural History Museum. Okay, moving on. 36-37. Sort of at this stage, I was starting to move towards the opinion that God was less likely rather than more likely. The God described in the scriptures I'd known for a long time as being a little bit barbaric, other than our interpretation of Jesus. Without evidence, there seemed little point in defending God's existence, but I still saw some good in my religion by way of charity and the intent to do good. So I still identified as a Catholic during this time. Okay, 38 to 44. What changed? The scandal about the child sex abuse by Catholic priests had been ongoing for some time. The Catholic Church at best was slow to react, and at worst seemed to be obfuscating the truth to protect itself and its priests. They said it was a minority, sure, but it wasn't an isolated incident. And I left the religion at this time to all intents and purposes. To continue to be part of such an organisation would have, in my view, been in some way condoning them. Also, why was the church still not promoting contraceptive prophylactics in places to prevent the spread of disease? I couldn't work that out. At this point, it's also worth saying that other religions, in my view, were at least as bad. For example, why people are still happy to associate themselves with Islam when there's so much bad done in its name, promoted by a very sizable minority. Well, that's strange to me, why they would want to do that. Okay, 45 and beyond. I still go to the odd religious event, so that's why I'm not at the very bottom of this chart. Like funerals and weddings, for example. And I still like beautiful religious buildings and their trappings. But otherwise, I don't observe any religious rites. I think the balance of probability is very heavily in favour of there being no God. It's a bit more likely to me that there's an afterlife, or that we're eternal, multi-dimensional beings residing across an infinity of parallel worlds of a multiverse, for example. But it's most likely by a long way, in my mind, that we just cease to exist at the point of death. Okay, thank you. No, I've not mentioned the word atheist or atheism. That's because whilst literally the word just means you don't believe in God, you're not a theist, it is taken by many to mean that you have a certain worldview, which I don't really. As per my previous video, what I really don't like is enforced dogma. So atheist dogma, e.g. communism, and religious dogma are pretty much as bad as each other in my mind. I only really complain about religions when they're infringing on the freedoms of folks that don't subscribe to them. None of the religiously faithful people I personally know are guilty of this anyway. To sum up on the subject of God, I am not any more qualified than anyone else to say whether there is a God or an afterlife or not. I'm only going off my own experience in believing that the balance of probability is that there is no God, and I get on with lots of people that hold the other viewpoint. Last thing, because I'm not going to do another presentation specifically on astrology, it's worth saying long ago I worked out that astrology is a complete con that relies heavily on vague statements and confirmation bias. Oh, and as for ghosts, my curiosity has taken me to graveyards at night, dark corridors of supposedly haunted ancient buildings, country lanes where ghosts were supposed to be seen, and neither I nor my dog, when she's been with me, have ever seen anything close, not even one little apparition. Anyway, just put me down for being a non-believer or a doubter. Anyway, next video will be on my political views. I will catch you next time, folks.